second, so we're on the task. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with you guys today. Just a little bit about myself. You see a much younger version of myself up here on the screen, okay? Well, that's because my wife and I are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. That's right, the whole year, okay? It's too good not to celebrate more than one day. And then next year we're going to celebrate our 11th anniversary for the whole year, and then 12 for the, okay? So, but it was pretty fun what my wife and I did for each other at our wedding is we said to the photographer, she actually came to us and said, hey, pick somewhere in the farm where you want a backdrop that represents your future spouse. And so I picked the bulldozer for my wife because she grew up in a tiling and excavating family and still operates and owns that company today. So we thought that'd be kind of a cool backdrop, and she picked the cornfield, okay? So obviously that's what my passion is. I'm passionate about farming, passionate about growing row crops. My wife and I are very career orientated. There she is 2 years ago hanging her shingle. Firle CPA, she's an accountant. Next to that is the AgronomyRx logo, just one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. A beautiful harvest sunset. Got a picture of that logo, that's my business. Obviously, they're both of our businesses. We do get away and have some fun there with our little dog. We get up northern Minnesota fishing once in a while. The Lord has also blessed me with a servant's heart, and I think that's what I really I'm passionate about. That's what I'm here sharing. I can do research until I'm blue in the face, but until I help a farmer make a more profitable decision, it really goes to waste. So I get to live out my servant's heart as a firefighter for our community of Gibbon. That combined with agriculture has started a really cool project that I just added that picture last night. I designed a rural rescue response trailer. In 2019, our department responded to a grain bin incident where a local farmer was trapped, and we actually saved him. We found him, we got to him in time, and we were able to rescue him because we had the right equipment, and a local farmer, the neighbor, had his grain vac set up ready to go. And that grain vac was really instrumental in that successful rescue. So we started asking other fire departments what accessibility they have to grain vacs, and it was very limited, right? So since 2019, I've been sharing with the fire departments our strategies, our win in that situation, because it's really hard to talk about it if we want to have that success rescue. It's really emotionally straining on both the family as well as the first responders. So our department went to work designing this trailer. It's got its own self-powered grain vac on there with all the compartments to hold the tools, but also to hold tools like these big old lifting bags. 90% of the fire departments have lifting bags that can only lift about 6 tons. You know how much your S690 combine weighs if it tips on you? A little more than 6 tons, okay? So we just equipped ourselves with more equipment. So this trailer has the capacity to hold all the equipment needed for a rural rescue of today at a fraction of the cost of what a new fire truck costs, okay? Because we taxpayers don't want to pay for another fire truck for the fire department to use once a year. So anyway, just a little side story. And then I also get to go hunting once a year. I go out to Colorado with my dad. 2 years ago, my brother and brother-in-law joined us, so get to do some fun things. So there's a little bit about myself. This is what started AgronomyRx. There's a lot of books in front of us. There's a lot of resources, but I'll tell you one thing. The #1 go-to book to be a better farmer, to be a better steward of the land, to be a better husband, to be a better man or woman is the Bible. And this is a Bible verse that stood out to me back in 2006. And it was, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. It's pretty simple, right? Just go get the wisdom. The action step is, in all you're getting, get understanding. And it really is about that. It's seeking the understanding of why we're doing the things we're doing, or why we see the response that we see to a certain practice or product that we're using. And that's what started this drive in mind for starting AgronomyRx. I'm from Gibbon, Minnesota. I put it on a map just because Gibbon isn't really that big of a town. It's not on a map. 720 people in our community. Most people in Minnesota know it for the ballroom that was. It's now a shed that holds machinery. But we're putting Gibbon back on the map with our research facility. You'll find our facility right there on Highway 19. And that's a little bit about AgronomyRx. It started just to really keep the peace between my dad and I. It really did. So as an agronomist coming out of college, I had all these bright ideas for doing these trials, and I would set them up on the farm, and then I'd go to work, and then I'd come back on the weekend, and the field was missing. Where'd the data go? Okay, well, practically speaking, there's a rain cloud coming. Uncle was here to help. We got the field done, right? So it was really Dad, there's value in trying to understand what we're learning here so that we can identify the opportunity for profitability. So what we did is we took 12 acres in 2009 and said, these are my 12 acres, I get to do what I want on those, and it has expanded to today 520 acres, 440 of those where we have replicated trials. I'll explain a little bit about the testing, how we set it up, but those replicated trials are designed with myself and you guys, a farmer, in mind to have some of those variabilities involved in it. Last year we conducted 96 studies on the farm. Of those 96 studies, some of them are published, some of them are not. I'll get into those details as well. So there you can see our home campus, 230 acres, right around the community of Gibbon, and then we have another 210 acres north of town, and then we're expanding on to some more larger farm trials, because some of the things we can't do in these smaller block replications. So it's exciting to be here to share this with you. Like I said earlier, if I'm not sharing this information and helping you guys have a better understanding, then I'm not doing my job. So if you have any questions, this is your opportunity to ask and help you guys understand it and to dig a little deeper into it. How we do our research, here's why I got my pointer. Did you know you can't point a laser at a TV screen because it disappears? All right, so we're going old school. So this is what our replicated testing looks like. This is maybe what we think of when we think of testing in agriculture today. Both equally important, okay? This small-scale rep trial is very important in identifying really that baseline aha moment of should we move forward with this product or not, okay? And this is done a lot with seed companies. This is also done a lot with a lot of our biologicals, our fungicides, our insecticides. They're done on a very small scale, and that's a technical research project. I like to say that's the manufacturer's responsibility to identify whether this product has merit in the field or not. Unfortunately for us farmers, what this data does is it eliminates a lot of variables, as many variables as possible. Well, guess what? On my farm, in a half-mile run, I've got a lot of variables. There's no same soil type, there's no same CEC, no same phosphorus, no same pH from one end of the field to the other. So I wanted to incorporate a data set that has some of those variables in there, because we can see in this testing 30, 40, 50 bushel differences. But when we bring it to the field, we maybe only see that on a tenth of those acres, and then it translates out to be about a 4 or 5 bushel increase across the farm. So I want to identify that. So this is actually a test, and you can't see a lot of differences out there, can you? No. And how many times do we do a side-by-side in our farm at the end of the year we go, I don't know if I really saw anything. Okay, it happens a lot, but that's the way we designed it. So 2020 we did this nitrogen study, and it's a great picture because it helps shape out this study and how we replicate it. So you can see the control of no nitrogen, okay, 4 controls there, and then we did different nitrogenates next to it. So we're still replicating, but we're stretching that data set from 250 to 500 foot strips to get that variability from one end to the other, okay? We feel like that's giving us that difference. And so what you see in our data set is we don't see a lot of these 20, 30 bushel swings, but we will see those more practical expectations from the field. We use field scale equipment. Field scale equipment, I say it with a grain of salt. I don't have a 24, 36, 48 row planter, okay? We have 12 rows of planters, a 4 row and an 8 row. We added another 4 row to the fleet, so I guess we could say we had 16. But what we mean by field scale is all the equipment that you see in the testing is stuff that you can buy and put on your planter, or it's something you can put on your sprayer. We're not manipulating the equipment to give us a different data set. We're actually just setting the equipment up to help us understand that data set a little bit better. So as you can see here, this is our 4 row. A lot of things that we're doing in there. Here's how we're doing to adjust. So we have our 2 cone tanks. One's for our 2x2x2, the other's for our Firle. And that allows us to clean that tank out a little quicker and speed up the process of doing the research trials. 96 studies, on average, about 5 treatments per study. So, you know, there's a lot of times we're having to clean and change and do a lot of this. Our cabs probably look a lot like yours. Kind of getting hard to see out the one side, isn't it? Especially during spring. Right-hand turns only, so you can look out the left-hand window. Kidding, but this is Blake's office in the spring. I forgot to mention that. Sorry, Jeepers, Logan's even in the room. I got 2 right-hand men, okay? I got Blake. Blake is my operations guy. He's the brains behind setting up these studies and making sure that I don't screw up on the data, because I turned into my father pretty quick. So Blake keeps me grounded. Logan's here. Logan is the field agronomist. Logan is the one who really helps us when we start pushing things onto farm and identifying those on-farm opportunities. So happy to have Logan here. So this is Blake's office for the spring. We do make some equipment that helps get that field scale experience. For instance, this is our fertilizer spreader. We can variable rate spread with this thing, but I wanted an airflow because it drove me nuts that all of our data is coming from a summer intern or a grad student that's walking behind a push spreader or walking at a certain speed, making sure they're cranking at the right pace. But yet, our precision today, we can accurately apply 64 pounds of product versus 72 pounds of product. So I wanted to be able to do our research in the same manner that we could accurately apply that, so we built this airflow spreader for all of our fertilizer trials. We utilize a Hagie 2101 on the farm. We do have some cones on the back again if we're spraying different foliar products. We actually started to see a difference between studies. In the morning when we would start for the day, the first product we applied trended a higher yield than the last product we applied because the studies used to take us about 3 hours. Well, so what we did is we put 4 cones on the back so we could pre-mix those products, go to the field, and now get that study done within 40 minutes. And it really sharpened the data up a little bit. So trying to do some things to help, but really not manipulating. You'll see a lot of green paint on here. Sorry for the red guys. I just like John Deere. I know how to work on them. So we do have 2 9400 combines. The reason we have those is this is what we built inside the grain tank. We do everything by weight because what do we sell as farmers? Weight. We don't sell bushels, we sell weight. So I measure everything by weight, but what we learned is it was really hard to dump 96 studies times 5 treatments, each study replicated 5 times, 2,500 plus times dumping anywhere from 30 to 150 pounds into the weigh wagon. A gust of wind could be a variable in the data because you missed the weigh wagon. So we wanted to do this. It also helps speed up the process. We can now take, in soybeans, we can take about 8 treatments out before having to dump this scale system. And then utilizing precision, we actually have the other combine getting set up with an egg leader. We try and be as neutral as we can. With the egg leader moisture sensor and yield monitoring system. So we also do map this stuff as well. So we can have that visual to see from one end of that strip to the other, where was that difference. But this was just kind of a brainchild of mine. My best friend's an engineer. It's great to know an engineer. It's really good with welding. So this is kind of our brainchild, but pretty neat system there. And then again, at the end of the year, we have our publication. So we have our fresh 2022 books here. Each one of you can take a copy. I brought enough with. But this is the publication that Blake and Logan and I put together, and this is really just taking a look at the data at the end of the season saying, what stood up? What do we feel like we need to share with farmers? Some of it is contracted projects that we go to the manufacturer and say, can we publish this information? Because we think there's a story to tell. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. So we do respect that. But for the most part, these are our projects that we design at the beginning of the year that we have to answer farmers' questions. So 25 studies in that book. We have approximately 20 studies that we're under contract. So we do have a contracted service where a company can approach us and say, we want to test these 4 products or these 4 variations of a product. And then we send that data back to them, and it's theirs to do with what they want. Then there's about 10 kind of, how do I word this? Throw it at the wall and hope it sticks type trials, okay? So we do a lot of wild things like, man, is this even something we can test? Is there anything to it? And most of those are actually driven by conversation with farmers. Like, have you ever tested this? Or have you ever thought about that? So we'll do about 10 studies every year to that. And then about 44 studies is part of a larger network, which is called Beck's Practical Farm Research. So I also do wear a different hat. I do work full-time for Beck's Hybrids as the agronomy manager. I cover Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, and Iowa. I get to do it from my office. And really, I joined with the Beck family because of this. This is a huge network of trials. And everything done within Beck's PFR is independent studies that has nothing to do with the seed that's being sold. So that publication is here. These books probably just hit your mails. Most of you probably got one. I think we sent somewhere around 78,000 copies of this book out. Open it up and look at it. I don't care if you like Beck's or don't like Beck's. This is a really good resource of agronomy information. And I'm really happy to be part of this because we get to see how some of these trials work on heavy clays or southern environments or northern movements. So it's a really cool network to be a part of, to share this information amongst. And I get to lead that from my facility in Gibbon. So 44 studies on our farm last year were for Beck's PFR. there's a little background. Try and get that done in about 20 minutes. I think I got it done in about 10. Whew. All right, now we can breathe. So, 2022 to 23, why did I put 22 smaller? A wise man once told me the rear view mirror is smaller than the windshield because we're supposed to focus more on the future than the past. It's still important to look in the mirror once in a while, okay? So we're going to look back at some of the data in 22, but my hope is that it intrigues thoughts and questions for 2023. Here's kind of the agenda that I want to go through. This is going to be fast-paced, okay? If you haven't told by now, I like to move things along pretty quick. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this. Do jot down any questions you have, and if you've got a burning one that you think you're going to forget, throw it out there, okay? Don't shut off, but I'm going to move pretty quick through some of these things. These are some of the standouts to myself, Blake, Logan, that were kind of like, man, this is good information to share, okay? So, tire pressure. How many of you guys know exactly, and please interact, okay? How many of you guys know what tire pressure is in the tires of the tractor pulling your planter? Okay, 1, 2, couple, 3, 4. It's usually about 10% of the room, so I think we're pretty close in that realm, okay? 10% know exactly what it should be. Well, if you ask your tire manufacturer, they'll tell you what you should run in that tractor. And it's based on 2 factors. What's the heaviest the tractor is going to be, and what's the fastest it goes down the road. So, our 7280R, we have our front fertilizer tank when we're pulling our planter. That's got our 2x2x2 nitrogen and sulfur. What we do is we filled that full, and we weighed the front axle, then we weighed the rear axle with the planter folded up, okay? Because that's the heaviest it's going to be. This tractor will go 30 miles an hour down the road. It's got a high-speed transmission. So the recommendation for a standard radial was 28 pounds of pressure, okay? 28 pounds of pressure was the recommendation. That's kind of a lot. When I look at a tire at 28 pounds or 35 pounds, we really I forgot I got this pointer here. We really start to see that, you know, we don't have even one active lug touching that ground. And what an active lug means is that that whole lug is touching. So I want to see no light underneath the edge of this lug. So the books all say we should have at least 3 active lugs. And at 35 or 28 pounds, I don't even have 1. That tire recommendation is so that I'm happy with the manufacturer's tire. It has nothing to do with what's going to impact the soil or what it's going to do to impact my yield. It's not an agronomic recommendation. It's solely a tire manufacturer. It's to extend the life of the tire. Looking at the same tire at 6 PSI, I now have 4 active, 3.5, call it 4 active lugs touching that ground. Really what I'm talking about with this study is going to be compaction. Traction is different. Compaction is one thing, traction is completely different things. The reason they're called tracks, in my opinion, is because they're better for traction, not for compaction. And what I mean is, these 3 points right there, we can see the indent in the track, are 3 small points of contact to the ground, versus a tire properly inflated is 1 large point of contact to the ground. So that 1 large is better than 3 small. Don't take my word for it. That's coming right from Firestone, who sells both tires and tracks. In their 3 years of studies, they said that a tire under 20 PSI has less contact pressure than tracks. You will reduce compaction with a tire under 20 PSI versus a track. Tires inflated from 20 to 35, probably pretty comparable, okay? Most of that data showed, that was all from a 4-track tractor compared to a tractor with 4 tires in the front, 4 tires in the back, okay? So think of my setup, for instance, duals in the front, duals in the back. I was in that 28 PSI, probably pretty comparable on the compaction to a track. And then anything over 35 PSI, more contact pressure in the tracks. I actually asked some of their techs, you know, does this mean just the tractor tires? And they said, no, think of any tire, okay? Think your planter tires and your center fills. Who's running less than 80 pounds in their center fills down the road? Probably none of us. We have to have them at 90 to 100 or 110 because we want to fill the seed, fill the fertilizer, get to the field, fold out, and go. But think of what that tire is doing in between those 2 rows and how that impacts yield. So, really what prompted this study were 2 new technologies. One, these inflation kits. So this is a PTG inflation kit. This is from, we partnered with NTS out of Redwood Falls. They have the U.S. distribution for the aftermarket kits. If you buy a brand new fence, congratulations, it has an integrated inflation kit already built in. Okay, that's one of their new selling features is you can change that PSI right from the touchscreen monitor. We added it on, and then also the tires that you see on here, VF tires from Alliance. You can buy them through Michelin Firestone now. You didn't hear it from me, but somebody in Webster City told you that all the VFs are being manufactured in the same plant, just getting printed a different thing on the side. But okay, that's why we picked NTS. They're independent. But these VF tires really stands for very flexible. It's the same sidewalls what's on those big LSWs, so we can run them down to really low PSI. So I can run 40% less pressure in that tire in the same road situation. So I can go from 28 down to 20 PSI in that tractor with these tires safely down the road 30 miles an hour full width with the planter pulled up. Pretty cool. So just the tire technology alone allows me to run a lower PSI. Go ahead.
Just compare field or minimum field fields versus no-till fields.
Yeah. So I think of no-till fields, right? We're not doing anything to alleviate that year that we're maybe pushing those environmental challenges and maybe creating some compaction. So I don't know if they have a better play. I would say longer term, proper inflation is a better play on no-till or minimum till. With conventional till, we can erase a lot of problems pretty easily each year. So we're just simply looking at the setup as a whole. The inflation kit is on this tractor because I can actually run these in field mode down at 6 PSI. So that's why I took the picture at 6. It's a little nerve-wracking turning around on the end of the field, coming up to the end on 6 PSI. It feels like you're going to scrub off. So we actually bump them up to 8 because it makes us feel a little bit better. So there's the farmer blood in us. But this is what the study looks like. And the reason we did this was 3 years ago now in February, I went around to the PSI meter in my pocket going into the study, and I tested 32 tractors that were in somebody's shop, hooked up to the planter, ready to go. 10% knew exactly what it was, and they were somewhere in this 18 to 22 PSI range, and that was based on a manufacturer recommendation in the field setting. There were 10% that were pretty proud of telling me, I know exactly what's in that tire. You can go check it, it's exactly what's printed on the side. What's printed on the side of the tire is the PSI needed to seat the beat, okay? Don't run that, just drop it. Our data will help show that. So don't run 35, but we did that as a control. 28 is what I needed with my radials. 20 was just with the inflation kit, or I'm sorry, with the VF tires. And then 12 PSI, the reason we ran 12 is because with those VFs and not having an inflation, I could run 12 PSI pretty comfortably in the field on the road. And then 6 is the lowest we could go before the warranty is void. I don't know how they're gonna ever come out and prove that when a sidewall blows out on a tire, you were under 6 PSI or not, but that's where the warranty goes void. So you can see the footprint difference. We actually drove on these storyboards, painted it black, let it dry, backed off, lowered the PSI, drove on, painted another one, just to measure how many square inches we got. So that was the rear, this is the front, going from 35 to 6, we're doubling that footprint. And then we also did the planter tires because the VF technology is available in these, they call them IFs, implement flexible sidewalls. But you can put those on our planter and look at that difference, okay? Now remember, I'm an 8-row planter, okay? I'm gonna go down to 6 PSI. Now this isn't what a center fill is gonna allow you to do, but what you can do with these IF tires is run 40% less. So for simple math, if you run in 100 pounds in a center fill with these IFs, you could run 60 pounds. So if we just look at that percentage of spread difference, the same weight, you're looking at probably somewhere in this 40 to 50% increase in your footprint. If you put an inflation kit on your planter, then you can drop it another 40% and be running somewhere, 40% of that 60, and to be running somewhere in that 40 PSI range in the field. And when you start looking at what that does on a center fill, we'll have maps like this next year. We confirmed yesterday with the grower he's gonna let us do it with a center fill, full of seed liquid. But we're thinking we're gonna be somewhere in that 120% increase of footprint per tire, on all 4 tires. Well, what's a track on a planter? Not much more. Not much more as we pertain to the square inches touching. So pretty excited about this. I think this is going to help us mitigate some of those center fill compactions. My favorite thing to scout is a 36-row planter with a 12-row head, because I can isolate those center 12 rows. The worst I've ever seen is 36 bushel loss across a farm, across the entire farm, center 12 versus the outside 12s. I presented this in Mitchell a couple weeks ago, Mitchell, South Dakota. The farmer raised his hand, he goes, 36 is nothing. He said, we just did 2 years of data evaluation, we lost 52 bushel to the acre, our center 12 rows compared to our outside 12s. Just simply because of that weight and those pinch points on all those rows. So I think this is just a small thing. Precision farming to me, and I'll say this when I get into planters, precision farming to me is the small little things we can do, the decisions along the way. It's not the equipment we put on the planter. This is one of those small decisions. So this was last year's data. We did plant the corn into a little bit marginal conditions. Has anyone planted in the ground that's a little bit marginal? Yep, lots of hands. Okay, so we wanted to do that this year because last year when we did it for the first year, it was really good planting conditions. So we pushed it a little bit on our corn and we saw a bigger yield increase. The lower the PSI, the higher the yield. This was planting 8 rows, measuring the center 6. So any row that was affected by tractor tire is what we measured for yield. On soybeans, okay, I put soybeans up there. We saw an increase as we went, but not as good, but pretty consistent with what we saw last year. This was interesting, so we did do this study through PFR. We did it on 5 additional locations, 5 different tractors, 5 different planters. Again, smaller equipment, all have radial tires, none of the VFs, no inflation kits. We wanted to see, is this something we can quantify? What we found interesting was our 15-inch rows versus our 30-inch rows on soybeans. Those 15-inch rows stair-stepped up almost 200% of a gain. Well, why is that? Because some of those rows are being planted right into that tire track, okay? And how that works is if at, let's say, 28 PSI, I'm pushing down or compacting 1.75 inches of that soil. My discs, if I'm planting at 1.5 inches of my soybeans, are not getting low enough to blow that compaction out and I'm placing seed right into a hard pan. If I can lower my PSI, now I'm only pushing that soil down to 1.25 inches. Now my discs planting at 1.5 inches are blowing that compaction out and I'm placing seed, better seed, or soil for better seed and soil contact. So pretty neat study there. This is my 2-year data from Gibbon, just looking at the combined of really good planting year versus a pretty poor one, and we're seeing a pretty nice trend here as lowering PSI. This was one of those studies we threw against the wall in 2020, and it's become something consistent over the last 2 years. So it's pretty neat. You start thinking about the soil biology, you start thinking of soil health and all those things. When we compress soil, we reduce oxygen. What happens if you and I reduce our oxygen right now? Maybe this half the room we should put our hands over our mouths and nose for the next 10 minutes and see who's more lethargic, right? That's what's happening to the soil biology. So think about that. Pretty neat study. Where can it go from here? This one is where this is something, I'm gonna bounce some of these things to kind of keep your eye on us for the next year. What we did last year is we laid some strips out there. Sorry for the no-tillers in the room. You're gonna see some tillage in my presentation. I like tillage from a standpoint of I'm not a recreational tiller, okay? Tillage to me is a strategy. I only use it when I need to, and I use the aggression as much as I need to. So some years we're doing some minimal till stuff, some years we're going to do some detail. It's all dependent upon what the conditions present themselves to me. We're fortunate on the research farm that we got a lot of different tillage equipment, pieces of equipment. If it was a perfect world scenario, I wish everybody had a no-till drill, no-till planter, conventional tillage program with all that equipment, rippers, field cultivators, some minimal till in between, because each year presents us a different opportunity. So what we did here is this is a 9-shank ripper. What I did, I took the points off with the wings because we were pretty dry last year and I wanted to get below my compaction. So I just put a straight point on there. So 15-inch shank spacing, about 10 inches of depth. My compaction layer was at 8 inches. And why was my compaction layer 8 inches? Because that's where I ripped last year when it was really wet. So I think I blew it out. But I put on no wings on the points, pulling it with this tractor, about 5.5 miles an hour. What we did is we stripped. So we took 28 passes, 14 of those passes across the field. We cleared the monitor and ran with 28 PSI in the tractor. And then the other ones in between, when we filled back in, we ran it down to 12. And we tracked the performance monitor and saw that we had 6% slip at 28 PSI with 1.6 gallon to the acre fuel usage, where with our 12 PSI we had 3% slip. You want to have a little slip, that's okay, at 1.3 gallons. So 0.3 gallon to the acre on one tillage pass savings. that's where traction can start to build us a profitability, right? So I took a tire machine, optimized the traction, took all that energy that we're burning in that, with that fuel, and put it into motion that was making some money. So we're gonna put some crop on top of this to see, is there any quantification as it pertains to yield on top of this? So this is one of those we're throwing at the wall. All right, planter equipment. So I think the most important thing we can do is the maintenance of our planter. This was a quote from an anonymous farmer, right? The planter is that piece of equipment that we put away in the fall, in the spring. It was perfect, it worked great, finished the last field. And then we put it in the shed this time here, we go, oh man, it's like wore out. A piece of junk, I gotta replace these arms, I gotta replace these discs, right? So we put a lot of emphasis into it now, which is a good thing. But I kind of want us to think about these things as we move through the whole thing. So Clayton Stufflebeam, a lot of this stuff is from him. He's our PFR agronomist in Illinois. He's great with planters. For years, his passion has been digging into every make and model of planter and where is the low-hanging fruit. He's on tour right now, actually. He does a 2-hour pre-plant clinic where he just focuses on the planter. So if you see one of those opportunities, jump in it. I took some stuff from him just to share, just as some reminders, okay? So, maintenance before upgrades. It's really important to look at that. Sorry for the wordy slide. I'm not going to read this slide, okay? I want you guys to do this. But these are the really, probably 40,000, not 60,000 foot view, but 40,000 foot view things we should be looking at on our planters going into the spring. If you have a shop, I think it makes us the most money when we get the planter in there now, because we can start breaking it down, getting it ready, and be prepared. A proactive agronomy solution is always better than a reactive one, right? A proactive date with your wife is always better than a reactive date with your wife. Okay? Think of that next time. So, parallel linkage, gauge wheels, meters, seed tubes, or speed tubes, right? We're entering kind of this new era where we have to start really digging into that. Those speed tubes can be kind of a maintenance pig, but they are the one low-hanging thing on that planter that if they're not working properly, they can really hurt us. At least with a seed tube, if there was something wrong, a crack, or there's some dog ears starting to show, most likely it wasn't going to affect the drop that much. But with these speed tubes, if something isn't working on there, it's messing up that whole row of delivery. So a lot of maintenance on those to look into. Meters, I don't know, a lot of people have the equipment to do that on farms, so make sure you're getting those serviced. Gauge wheels, I got a cool video to show you in a bit. Parallel linkage, I think that's the most overlooked, especially with this hydraulic downforce. There's a lot of ovaling out that can take place on those bushings. So be looking to replace those bushings, and it's just simply measuring the slop. If you got a ½ inch of slop left or right or up and down, that's enough to warrant going out and making those adjustments and putting new bushings in. So it doesn't take much slop to do that. Looking at closing wheels, it depends on the closing wheel that you have. I'll talk some of the things that we've learned on our farm, but do follow manufacturer on that. Seed firmers, for those that are running them, I'm really impartial about seed firmers. There are some years where I love them, they're pushing that seed in and it's helping keep that singulation intact. But if it's just a little bit wet, then they start dragging and moving. So again, this is kind of like tillage. Just because you have them on your planter doesn't mean it's the right year to run them. But if you don't have them on your planter, then you don't have the option to run them. So it's kind of that catch-22. But that's the way I think about seed firmers. But do make sure that there's that 20 ounces of coal using a fish scale. Pretty simple. Ground engaging components. So that's anything that's helping those movements. If you have the ground-driven or hydraulic drive. Bulk delivery systems. I think we overlook those a lot too. Look for cracks and wears in the 90-degree bends, right? There can be a lot of hang up there. And there's some talc replacement studies that we've done that without running it through a center fill, there's some products that are showing some really good promise out there, dust being one of them. Where guys have problems with them is in the center fill, and what we're learning is that there's wear on the inside of those tubes and it's building up in there. So is it the talc replacement problem, or is it we need to replace the tube? So some of those little things we don't think about. Look for cracks. Make sure there's seals, so we got that good pressure to deliver the seed out. And then just some of the general maintenance. Tire PSI, I put this on here because the first year we did that tire study, that is a wheel-to-wheel drive on there, okay? So that when I set the planter down, a wheel hit it. Did you know that that wheel has to be at a certain PSI? According to my manual on my John Deere, it has to be at 28 psi. And when the tire underneath it wasn't at 45 psi, my population changed. So as I lowered, that first year we did the study, as I lowered the psi in the tire, I actually decreased the population. Even, I didn't publish that data, we still saw a yield increase. Lower population should be, a seed company should not be talking about lower populations and having higher yields, right? But it was just something that we saw. So there is some important things to really be focusing on when it comes to the proper PSI. It's not a bad thing. We ran 12 PSI last year. We just charted it out. We just knew that we had to adjust manually the population to keep it same for the study. It wasn't a big deal, but it was just something that we caught. Toolbar, hinges, pins, etc., etc. So that's a really easy breezy one. But what is the number one thing that goes wrong when you go to the field for the first day? What is it? Huh? Electronics. That's right. It's the number one thing. It's what I get the most phone calls on. It worked in the yard. It's not working here. Okay? A lot of times it's a simple software update. It really is. So just make sure that you do fold out in the yard. Run some schematics through. Run some of those demos through it. There's a great opportunity to catch those things before you get to the field, because it's just as annoying for the guy that you're calling as it is for the guy running the planter himself, right? This technology for me, it does bug me. I'm not the best with it, right? It bugs Blake more so. It's good that we can lean on each other and mourn with one another on it. So, but again, just making sure that we're doing those updates on there. Here's a tidbit of information. So I think this is one of the most important things we can do, even on new planters, is index them. And really indexing is just making sure that all of the rows are at the same depth. Just because it's 2 and 3 on one row doesn't mean 2 and 3 on the next row is going to give me my 2 inches. Why I think this is so important is because some of the earliest studies I did at AgronomyRx were the simple planting depths. The argument I had with my dad and grandpa was, guys, agronomically speaking, I want those nodal roots to be under the soil, and in order to do that, I have to plant at 2 inches. And Dad would say, no, it's not going to come out of the ground, it's going to crust over, we got to go 1.5 inches, so we would argue about that. So what we did was we did a lot of planting depth, and I've got 7 years of data that shows 2 inches or 2 1/4 is 3 to 6 bushel than any shallower depth than that on corn. So 2 to 2 1/4 is my corn. 1.5 to 1 3/4 was 2 to 3 bushel than anything shallower than that. So planting depth is the simplest thing that we can change that gives us a profit or a loss, right? It doesn't cost us anything to change it at the time. So if we have 4 rows on an 8-row planter that isn't planting the same as the other 4, just because I got them in the same hole combination, that's a percentage of loss across that planter. So indexing the planter just simply means making sure that the depth is true across them all, because there's a lot of wear points. So I've got a video from Clayton. He does a great job explaining this. I'll just make sure the sound is going to go. It's about 3 minutes.
All right, I'm going to show you how to do a quick indexing job on the 6-row John Deere 1755 1. Okay, quick easy job here. So what I'm going to do is all the way down on the ground. So we've got something kind of as deep as possible every row. And then I've got some ready strut right here. Basically 2 inches by 2 inches is what it is. We're going to come in here and we're going to lift up the first gauge wheel. I'm going to follow that opener in and then drop the gauge wheel. Then I'll turn around, we'll do it again over here. On that side of the opener, follow the opener in, drop it, shine your planter up to where it stops. And then from there, you're going to pull back out. You're going to go to the next row. Basically, goes row to row, that's the plan done. And it does work with conceal, which is really important because all the PFR planters today are utilizing conceal. And just like that, you got the whole 6-row planter indexed here. Very rare that you have all your rows at the same depth like this one. This planter here is very equal. The planters that you utilize at home, they're not going to be equal. So what wears in the planter itself is the bolt right down here that this hinge point rides on, that wears. The grooves in here wear, and then the frog wears, as well as where the frog rests on the gauge wheel down here. So if the planter does index row to row differently, that's fine as long as parts aren't wore through. And if they're all out of equal here, as far as your T-handles go, that is fine. Because your depth right now is equal row to row, and that was the goal. The only thing you need to do from now on is somehow label each row to where it needs to be set from the row right next to it. And you can give it plan.
That's how you index your plan. That's weird money, folks.
You brought the boy in on that one. Teaching him a lesson. So pretty simple, right? And I put this picture up here first because you see a lot of contraptions out there and they work, okay? But it can be as simple as setting the planter on the ground, finding something that's consistent, and running that depth check all the way through. So, pretty cool. Thanks to Clayton for putting those videos. He's got a whole video library that he's been building on this stuff, so we can get more of this information out. He's only one guy. So, that's about it on the planter maintenance side of things. If you do have questions, I take those at the end, because not everybody has the same color and make and model of it. So, I'm going to talk about some planter attachments. I'm going to start with closing wheels. I think this is the low-hanging fruit. I've personally tested, almost every spike closing wheel on the market. And I say almost because it seems like every year a new one comes or there's a change in a variation. Now we have a dip or it's got a little pit in there, or, something changes on it. So I personally tested on our farm almost every spike closing wheel. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. Every spike closing wheel on a John Deere or Kinsey planter outdid the standard OEM. Okay, and that was in no-till conditions and in conventional till. So every spike closing wheel beat. Now, you're not going to see red closing wheels, but you're going to see something that looks like them. So if you got a red planter, pat yourself on the back because John Deere and all these aftermarket companies are trying to compete with that. Okay, that's what I call a closing system. So we are testing some of those closing systems as well. But looking at it as a whole, really the purpose of that closing is just to make sure that we pinch that sidewall back in. It's kind of a catch-22, right? We want our planter to build this perfect sidewall, not have soil crumble in, and then crumble that soil back in at the right time. So that's really the purpose of it. Here's just quick data sets. I'm not going to belabor on these much, but PFR proven. This is alongside with Bex. What we do there is we test it for 3 years, and it shows a positive yield for each one of those years. And then at the end of those years, the ROI is positive. Then a stamp of PFR proven is put on it. It really allows us to move on from it, and it's a confidence thing for those looking at the data to know that there's been 3 years of testing that show really positives to it. So Poly Twister had the best, and that really had the best within all conditions, okay? Conventional and no-till. I liked it on the no-till because it's more of an aggressive lug. On the conventional till, I'd rather go with the Firle Cruiser because it has that dip in there, and it can actually close all of that smaller soil particles and get them crumbled in. So just a personal preference there. On soybeans, pretty much the same trend line. Where they work good on corn, they work good on soybeans. So there you can see there. And we don't have up here, I don't have up here the cast iron poly twisters. We didn't get that data set in. We're actually looking at that on the high-speed planter. It's really helping keep that closing wheel contact, ground contact more consistent at the higher speeds. So we do see a need for a heavier closing wheel in the higher speed settings. So this is all just at our standard 4.5 to 5 mile an hour.
You run those run 2 or just 1?
That's 2. All the data is 2. And the reason we test it that way, manufacturers design them to sell you 2. And so we want to make sure that we test 2. Like the twisters, for instance, there's actually a left and a right, the way that poly is formed. So it kind of twists it into the furrow. Copperheads, you can run 1 wheel on either side, but we like to see what we saw in really bad conditions was that if the spike was big enough and the solid rubber on one side, it barely touched the ground at times. So we weren't properly closing that trench. So we do like to see both in action. Good question. We also have this chart. You can look in the PFR book. We have a chart for every one of the wheels that we have. It's just kind of a cool thing. It shows acres to pay off. Sometimes we look at the initial cost and say that's a big investment. But really, you start looking at the number of rows, it doesn't take many acres to pay these things off, especially because, you know, we're leaning more towards the $6.50, $7 corn. It's pretty easy to pay for some of these things. So, and then here on soybeans, it's actually, in some cases, a little bit less, right? We're kind of off my chart here with 14. You can see how optimistic I was when I started developing this data a couple years ago. I wasn't as optimistic as I should have been. This is more of a closing system, so we did run some Firle Force the last 3 years. The data is a little different, but what the Firle Force is designed to do, this is what I call closing system. So there's a two-stage to it, right? You're actually using something to mechanically pull in that sidewall, and then you're using something to firm the soil, not trying to do it in one single motion. So there's a lot of advantages to this, especially in those high-speed settings, because you don't get that floating effect, right? Think of a boat when you're going across the lake and you pick up speed, you start to plane out. We do see that with some of the equipment, especially on spring tension. So the Firle Force has got the ability to push down on that and compensate as you increase that speed. What we saw here, this is why it looks a little different. This is only 2 years of data, 20 and 21. But we saw a pretty similar trend as we looked at this Firle Force system, and then we wanted to look at it in the field, okay? So this is the field scale data. What we're doing different, what I said earlier, why I'm expanding my acres in Gibbon, is there are just some things we can't test in a 250 to 500 foot strip. A high-speed planter is one of those, okay? By the time we get up to speed, we just blew through the grass alley, the other study block. We just messed that one up too, okay? High-speed discs, we're doing some of those studies. I have 39.14 acres of grass alleys, and I know that because I pay rent on those, and I pay a high school kid to mow them, and I fertilize them, and I get nothing back out of them, okay? So that number sticks in my head. I don't want to rip them up with a disc. So there's some studies that we have to do in more of a field scale. We move the closing system and our high-speed stuff to a field scale, and again, you can see compared to the cast twister, okay, the cast iron twister, that we still picked up 2.4 bushel on corn and 1.7 on the soybeans. So pretty neat closing system there. I think there's some merit to those systems out there. Now there's a whole bunch of other ones, right? It really comes down to what's your tillage practice, what's your soil type. Most of the manufacturers are starting to get enough data information and experienced farmers to help build that recommendation. So have some trust in those manufacturers. They're just not trying to sell you a product. They're gonna help place that product on your farm. Row cleaners, pretty quick on this one. They're important, especially to get that seed to soil contact. But what I scout in the spring is they also can be our biggest arch nemesis. Because what do we want to do? All the data out there, doesn't matter what company, it says plant earlier, okay? Plant faster. When we're planting earlier, especially where I'm at, we're planting in the colder soil conditions. And we've seen it time and time again that we've moved too much soil away. We'll go out there and put our thermometer at 4 inches and we'll say, all right, we're at 48 degrees. I mean 55 degrees. 48 degrees. Well, that's comfortable enough, I'm gonna go. And then my row cleaners moved 2 inches away, and I just placed that seed at 48 degrees when I knew that that 2 inches was probably 54 degrees. And so a lot of these sat cold germ problems that we see is when we're placing it into colder soil conditions. So we gotta be careful on how aggressive we set our row cleaners. I'd like to see ones that are floating or have some sort of a gauge to them. Our data shows that having a row cleaner does increase our yield. We have floating row cleaners versus 25 pounds of pressure down, just to see what that was looking like. This is data. You'll have to look at the book or go online to dig into the individuals, okay? I'm just kind of giving you the snapshot here. This is combined no-till, strip-till, and conventional till. So there were some differences in those no-till versus conventional. We looked at it across all the locations, and we looked at it from a 60,000 foot view. It pays to have them on the planter. It's just like that seed forever. If you run into the year where you got to start moving residue out of the way, you don't have them on there, well, now you don't have them. So Nothing says you can't pin those up. We've done that from time to time in our research. Same thing on soybeans, just moving that residue out of the way, helping get seed to soil contact. Disc openers, this is something I didn't talk about. Nobody called me out on the maintenance side of it, okay? It's almost becoming common practice that we're gonna replace these things every year. I want us to keep an eye on them throughout the year though. This is one of those things where those later fields that we plant typically see these issues. What we don't want is we don't want those discs to lose that contact, because then we got that little mohawk soil in there, and if that seed's placed on top of it, we might have a kernel at 1 3/4 and then 2 inches, and 2 inches, 1 3/4 and 2 inches. The flake tests that Precision send out, we love them, we use them, but when you actually look at that lagging one and you do a root dig, oftentimes we find it's just a difference in planting depth. So it probably had similar vigor, it just was a planting depth. And because we see a lot of this due to wore out disc openers, so disc openers are really important. We actually tested something last year, we ended testing it last year, called these STP disc openers. I caution talking about them because last year all of a sudden they weren't available. I mean, they got a lot of phone calls and then nobody could get them, okay? I don't know the status of these things. We have enough for our rows, and so I'm content, but I like them because what they do different is 2 things. One, they're serrated, so you actually help cut through some of that residue a little bit better if the row cleaners don't get it. But the most important thing is it creates a U-shaped trough. So instead of a sharp V, it's more of a U-shape. So now it doesn't matter if the kernel lands tip down or tip to the side or tip up, it's going to be at the same depth in that U-shaped trough. Where in a true V, if it doesn't fall flat down, it's not going to be at a consistent depth. I got to do a test with a company. They built a planter that oriented the seed the same way. There was this big boot at the bottom of the row unit, and they said 90% of the time you're going to have kernel tip down, oriented perpendicular, parallel to the row, not perpendicular, parallel. So you have the most accurate seed placement. And he said everyone we've done this test with, the first kernel they found was oriented the same way, and it was. The first kernel I found was oriented that way. We found about 80% practical. It wasn't. It's still in this R&D type phase. But somebody that's green just bought this company, and so you may see that technology advance somewhere down the line. Sidebar, sorry, I get onto those sometimes. U-shaped trough, really important to have, okay? I think that's really important. So that's where that STP came in. What we saw, about 1.5 bushels on corn and about 1.5 bushels on soybeans. So just simply building that trough a little bit different, getting that seed to fall in. One little change. So don't get your, I'm just saying, don't get your hopes up on them, okay? Because you can look into it.
You still need the seed firmers if you're getting that better U-shaped trough.
That's a good question. And what we found is we didn't need them. We actually took them off for this study because we didn't want that to be a factor. We wanted to truly compare naturally letting that kernel fall into that trench and not pushing it in. I would question it the other way. Do we need these disc openers if we have a seed firmer? And my answer would be no. I don't think you need this disc opener if you're a seed firmer in proper conditions. Because essentially that firmer is doing the same thing. It's pushing that seed down into that soil. Downforce, I think, is one of the most missed opportunities. I say good, better, best, right? As I said earlier, there's no 2 conditions across that half-mile or 1-mile stretch. And so if we're running springs, that's a 1 setting across every acre, okay? And if we didn't have some sort of automated downforce, what would we play with while we're planting up and down the field? Don't we find ourselves doing that a lot? Kind of looking at that map, making some adjustments, right? It's something that we can safely play with without making too many big costly mistakes. However, I do think it's important to have some sort of down pressure on those row units. If you don't have any of these, my recommendation is skip this one and skip this one and go right to that one. Dozens of growers that we do work with on farm and scout with, we walked them kind of through that process over the last 7 years of, maybe we should start with air and then we'll go to hydraulic, and it was one of our biggest regrets. We should have just went right to hydraulic. It just evens that planter out. Especially again, those larger center fills, it displaces weight even. It'll actually lift up and create a lifting on that heavy center of that planter. So you're displacing that weight more equally than you would on air and on springs. So hydraulic is what we are going to look at within the data. There are two different systems that we've tested. We've tested John Deere ExactEmerge. Well, if you have ExactEmerge, you have the hydraulic downforce from the on there already. But we did test the Ag Leader aftermarket add-on as well as Precision. I've got the data from Precision. Really just trust that automated setting, okay? Just trust it. Don't put it at a static. Trust it. I know you're going to look at the map and go, oh, I better bump it to 20, or oh, I better bump it another 20. What we found in our data is that we just leave it on the automated setting to hit our target. Okay, we're going to set our target. Then we hit this. So we set the target for 125 and then compared manual 50, manual 125, and manual 250. You can see that automated. So it shows how much variability is across that field just looking at one data set. On soybeans, again, same thing. Not as sharp of a difference. Pretty flat line here, but again shows the variability where the pickup comes in, because guess what happens on hydraulics sometimes? It's not always pushing down. Sometimes it's actually lifting up, right? And you're not going to get that with air, you're not going to get that with springs. So that's what this data shows, that a portion of the time through those data sets it was actually lifting. High-speed systems, we have, like I said earlier, we have 5 of them within PFR. That we're looking at, and again on the field scale setting. All the stuff we're doing around Given is working with local farmers on different trials. Anyone remember 2014 when we first started hearing it? This is what I thought of. Okay, I'm thinking, all right, let's go. Okay, it was pretty nerve-wracking at that time because it's like, man, I can't. In my head, I'm like 4.5 mile an hour. 4.4 is a better speed, but 4.5 I'll be comfortable with. And now we're talking 7, 8, 9. It's pretty neat. I like to call them seed delivery systems because just because you have it doesn't mean you have to be driving 10 mile an hour across every acre, right? So I call it a seed delivery system. The advantage really comes as you eliminate the variable of hoping the seed falls exactly the same way through that tube, right? You're taking that and making it a mechanical process. We've tested the 3 systems. Just some cliff notes on each one quick. Ag Leader. The thing to know with Ag Leader is they're designing this for all makes and models of planters, so that's pretty neat. We're doing something that's at AgriVital is we're investing heavily into Ag Leader, so I didn't know if I said this in the beginning, we don't get a lot of free stuff, okay? We do buy and invest into this because I want to be invested into it to know that I can share the experience and not feel bad that somebody gave me a system that I maybe talk bad about, okay? So we're investing into Ag Leader just simply because we have one whole setup already Precision. We want to take a look at what their future technology is bringing, and it's more exciting on the sprayer side of it than anything else. There's just a quick hit. But the thing to note here is that it is where do I got it here? It's a meter to belt, okay? So this is a belt that's delivering. So there's an actual transition from the meter right to the belt. We look at Precisions, okay, we're looking at that as more of a brush system, so the seed is falling into a brush. There's not a lot of, there's nothing really separating like you would think of with the old school belts to space that seed out. And then ExactEmerge is a brush belt combination. So those are kind of the differences. That's how they've gotten away with having 3 different systems. That's what differentiates them, why there was no patent infringement on Precision's high-speed system, okay? Quick data sets. This is just looking at the years that we tested it. This is actually just 1-year data last year. This year, the thing to know here, we didn't have any hydraulic downforce on that Kinsey planter, okay? So we think that the limiting factor wasn't the delivery system, it was actually not having that downforce as we picked up that speed, so it wasn't responding in time. So you can see there, not a huge difference in yield when we're looking at that 5 to 7.5. Looking at Precisions, our data, 3 years showed that 5 mile an hour was actually the highest yielding data or speed to use that system on. Now, I'm not going to lose sleep at night if there's a thunderhead in the west and I got 80 acres left. If I'm going to give up a bushel and a half to get that field done, I'm going to give up a bushel and a half to get the field done, right? It's more of an assurance thing. The ExactEmerge, there again, we kind of actually saw that upticking trend, or that U-shaped trend, where the highest speed gave us the highest yield. Okay? really the moral of the story of the high-speed systems, there's not that big of a difference between 5 and 10 mile an hour. So it's one of those things that's go what you're comfortable doing or comfortable letting your operator do. It's more or less a comfort to know that if I have to bump that speed up to make sure my planting dates stay relevant to where my highest yielding opportunities are, I can do that. The bad thing about high-speed systems is most of the times we have to upgrade a whole new plant, right? This isn't something that can be added on to most planters that exist out there. That's why there's the slower trend. I think the slow trend is simply because we can't make the new planters fast enough to keep up with the demand. All right, and we're going to transition a little bit here. I think I got 2 hours left before we're going to eat, right? All right. All right, we're going to transition a little bit. I'm going to tie some nitrogen into this. Starter fertilizer systems. This is also something that we test on a planter, right? Sorry for the shaky video. I take everything, my videos with slow motion. Sometimes they don't transition into PowerPoint very well. But we use a lot of slow motion so that we can see how everything moves and we can zoom in on it and so forth, so on. But that just gives you an idea of what we're doing the majority of our 60 pounds of nitrogen with. 2 by 2 by 2 really just means that I'm placing 2 bands, okay, on each side of the row, 1 band, 2 inches over, 2 inches down from the soil surface. It's not 2 inches down from the seed placement. I'm trying to get that to be equal to where my seed is. And I say trying because there isn't a lot of science behind getting that in without a knife. Conceal is the only thing that can really accurately place that band next to the seed. These are the systems that we've all tested. What you saw there was the Firle from Yetter with the you can buy it 2 ways. One, you can buy it with their single press reel. Okay, Case guys, you see anything familiar? John Deere guys, you can feel comfortable knowing that you can put your regular planting tail back on there, or closing tail back on. We elected to keep the closing tail back on just because we like our Firle cruisers on the farm. The dual UMO and then the conceal were also tested. If any suggestion, if you're going to stick with Yetter on a 2 by 2 by 2 system, go this way, don't go that way. There's no spring, there's no anything to give within that. And in my area, what catches in between there is a rock picker, okay? And then it's a dragger and it's a seed furrow opener for about a half a mile until you turn around and look back and you go, okay? So this spring and the dual offset springs allows more stuff to flow through. So really, again, what it means is just moving. This is 6 years of data, 7 locations that changed from 2 by 2 to 2 by 2 by 2, okay? This is the benefit of going on both sides. You can see, we see this preferential root development. That's not a good thing because we just limited this side from exploring nutrients and beneficials over here. We tricked or caused that plant to do that. So just simply taking 30 pounds and moving it 2 by 2 by 2, we picked up about 6 bushels. But then what it allowed us to do is increase that base rate. And I like that 60 pounds base rate because 60 pounds is going to get me to that V3 to V4 very comfortably with limited amount of loss of that nitrogen because I placed it so close to the row. I got it in the soil. I'm not worried about that much loss, okay? As the rest of that UAN converts, it's taking about the same GBUs as what that plant needs to get to that growth stage. So it's converting kind of one in hand with one another, and it's placed in the best spot. So we do get the question a lot then of, well, can I just dribble it on behind, okay? Our data says, yes, you can just dribble it on behind, but you are going to give up by not incorporating it into the soil, okay? So I say this because time equals money. I need a slide up there that says time equals money. And in some operations, we can't afford to have a liquid system on a planter, okay? And we can't afford to have all of the extra components hanging on there. Maybe it adjusts our width going on the road. A lot of reasons, okay? A lot of factors involved. I want to stay practical in my research, so we do look a lot at the top. So I'm going to convert to nitrogen before I get to some of my research with stream nozzles, stream bars, because I think, okay, that I figured this nitrogen thing out. Did you know that in 1980, the #1 most researched topic in agronomy, 1980, was nitrogen. In 2020, the #1 most funded research topic in agriculture, agronomy in the US was nitrogen. 40 years. We just saw how the planters have advanced in the last 10, but yet this nutrient, we still continue to pump hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into researching this thing. This is why, okay? This is why we put so much energy into research, is because it's so easy to blame it on the weather, something we can't control. This is just looking at June rainfall last year compared to its 10-year average, okay? So I'm about right here, and I was about 4 inches below my average rainfall in the month of June, okay? We're sitting somewhere in this area. Some of us in the room were probably above and some were even below, okay? There was a lot of variation. We actually saw, if you look in our book, I do my weather maps, and if you dig into it deep enough, you'll see, and it's correct, that in 1.5 miles from one farm to the other, we had a 2-inch rainfall difference this year. Isn't that crazy? I mean, those variations are something that can explain a lot that's happening in the field. It also gives something pretty easy to just blame our #1 investment on, right? Now is the weather. Move on to next year, figure it out, okay? Here's what I think. This is why I think I figured it out. I like to go spearing this time of year, okay? My grandpa used to call it ice hunting, okay? What you do is you cut a big old spear hole, about half the size of your table in the ice. You set a dark house up over it, and you put a decoy down, and you wait for a northern pike to come swim into it, and you throw a spear at it. It's just like hunting, right? You sit in the stand, you wait for something to walk by. You can't troll when you're doing this. You have to be patient. I like to do this. I actually just went last weekend. I got my 1 trip of the year in. But something that my grandpa did is he always put 2 different colored decoys down. And I always couldn't never figure it out. Couldn't comprehend it. Took all this space up. He'd spear fish. Everything's tangled up because he had 2 decoys down. So I'd always run 1. He always put 2 down, but they were always different colors. They were different colors, and his answer was simply, I just don't know what the northern's going to like today. It might like a white red, it might like a yellow red. You don't know if they're 20 feet under the ice looking, debating whether or not they're going to go eat that. So hedging our bets while ice fishing is something that is beneficial. You can see this northern decided to choose that one, and it was the demise of them, okay? So I also started, now that the industry is catching on to this, and the spearing industry, now they're painting golf balls. They're buying those cheap 30-cent golf balls, painting them and selling them for 25 bucks a piece. Because they got a little eye hook in there, and you buy a spinner, and now you got a golf ball and a decoy. So you got something just completely different form of trying to attract that fish. Long story short, I think this is the strategy to nitrogen. We don't know what Mother Nature is going to throw. We don't know what the weather's going to hold. So we have to hedge our bets. And there's multiple ways we can hedge our bets with nitrogen. And it's the 4 R's, right? The right source, the right rate, the right time, the right place. The America, the world, the population wants us to follow this because they're more worried about the environment, the economics. Well, guess what? As a farmer, I am too. When I get blamed for my Minnesota nitrates flowing down the Mississippi, that upsets me because it's my investment. I want that to go into my corn crop and then go into my bin, and then I can then have profit from that. So I'm going to be a steward of land just simply because I don't want a bad investment. It comes down to this. Number 1 and foremost, we have to know this. This is what 40 years of research has showed us, and it hasn't changed. We have to know that that corn is going to uptake a mass amount of nitrogen at a certain growth stage. So around that V6 is when it starts, okay? So we need X amount of nitrogen to get to V6, and then that rapid uptake starts. So how do I hedge my bets? I'm going to only put what I need out there to that V6. Okay? That's all I'm going to put. The rest of it I'm going to manage afterwards based on what that environment will up to. I'm going to get practical in a bit, okay? We're going to stay scientific for a while. Number 1, you know the nitrogen timing. Number 2, you have to understand it's a biological process. That form of nitrogen that we put in the soil has to convert somehow. Okay? It's not just all readily available to that plant. It has to take a process, and this process also takes time. Unfortunately, this process is influenced by moisture, temperature, again, Mother Nature. So if we just give it the time to convert before that V6, now we have hedged our bets on timing. Third part of timing is just simply moving the decision point closer to when that corn plant needs it or closer to harvest. The closer we get, the reduction of that error margin is. Okay? My fall applied studies that I put on, my decision's somewhere here. Okay? And right now, I've got some really bad things happening up by me. We're the 4th highest snowfall on record so far, and we just had some land surveyed, and the surveyor said, well, I'm going to drive the pins in, and I said, good luck. You know, we're usually 40, 50 inches of frost at this point. There's 4. There's 4 inches of frost underneath that 3 feet of snow that's blanketing the soil. So guess what else is happening underneath there? We're getting moisture movement, we're getting stuff pushing things down. So there's a lot of uncontrolled things happening in my nitrogen investment because I put it on too early. So it's all about timing. The source, each source converts differently, but if we hedge our bets on different sources, we can start controlling things, okay? I figured out a way to safely bottle and hydrous ammonia, if you guys catch that or not, okay? So, those are the different forms of nitrogen. All have their play, okay? All have their play. I for the first time in 10 years, Logan about crap when he found out what I was doing, he said, why is that not a hydrous applicator out of the ester? So, because we're gonna go back to doing the hydrous studies. The only reason we're doing that is over 55% of the nitrogen for next year's crop, according to our 2 local co-ops, is on already. Okay, not just a base, the whole thing's on it. So we needed to start looking at this to help answer some questions on why. So we're back to doing some anhydrous. But again, it's understanding the source. Each one converts differently. Manure is my favorite, but unfortunately we just don't have enough of it. A lot of carbon, a lot of beneficials in there. Okay, we heard that earlier. And then understanding what the right rate is. Simple rule of thumb. Okay, Larry's going to help you with this but looking at just simply that CEC, cation exchange capacity, times 10, that's the most in one single application I can put on. Don't look at the highest number in the field. I've got some fields that say 32, and in that same 80, I also have a 12. So in that 12, I'm going to be losing, if I put 200 pounds out there in one application, 80 pounds, okay? It's up for loss, I should say. It doesn't mean you're gonna lose it, it's just very volatile to the environment. So CDC times 2, that's what you put on your single application. This is a picture I took 2 years ago. 5 different nitrogen programs, same hybrid, same planting date, okay? We got a manure plus urea. We got a urea base plus a V6 side dress. We got all up front urea. We got urea split 50-50, half up front incorporated, half top dressed. And then I've got a liquid by liquid, 60 pounds with the planter, 130 pounds with the coulter. Why do I show this picture? There's no perfect plant in nitrogen. But you can see where I hedged my bets with different forms and different timings. I'm giving that corn crop the best chance of success, and I'm protecting my investment. I really think nitrogen management can be that easy. It's just making some of those decisions and hedging our bets against what Mother Nature throws. This was last year's data where we're starting to try and quantify these programs year over year, okay? So we're gonna do this on this 4.2 acres, and then we're gonna plant beans, and next year we're gonna do the same nitrogen program on it. To start seeing, are there some residual effects that might take place? So, again, anything hedged, excuse me, give us the yield. That's my timer. They start getting dry. All right, so the frog is going to stick my head. Larry, I guess I don't need to talk about this. I'm kidding.
No, you do.
So you can see in this data set that I've got 2x2x2, and I've also got this stream bar applied. This is where we're going to get practical with this program. I don't want to put liquid tanks on my planter. However, I think I want to get the benefit of having 60 pounds of nitrogen right over top of the road. This is something that we started doing. A friend of mine that farms in North Dakota called me one year. He said, hey, co-op couldn't get my nitrogen on in time, so I planted all my corn. I said, great. What are you going to do with your nitrogen? Or I said, what did you do with your nitrogen? Because we were about V2. He goes, well, I haven't done anything yet. Well, that's a problem, okay? And he says, but I got these stream bars that I use on my wheat crop. Can I just go spray my corn? You know, they reduce the burn on my wheat. And I'm thinking, oh no. No, I don't want you to do that, right? Agronomically speaking, not a recommendation, but the best option, the best tool in the toolbox. So he did it. He burnt some corn. Saw really no yield decrease from the burning that took place. And it really got the mind thinking like, man, he covered 1,400 acres in about 2 days, okay, of putting nitrogen on. This might be a practical solution to not putting nitrogen off the planter. So this is what I tested. This was our 4th year doing this. This diagram just shows that I replumbed the sprayer so that my stream bar was right over top of the row. That stream bar is about 10 inches wide. Gives enough room for wind sway or boom sway, okay? but then those drops fall straight to the soil. By the time that they get to the soil, okay, they're big, big droplets. And those big droplets splash, and that splash actually helps increase the contact to the soil, gets more soil particles moving there, you reduce the volatilization of it. Now, I'm also putting in ATS in this, so I'm putting some sulfur that helps that process, and I'm running cetane, which is one of George's CarbonWorks products, because that carbon creates a catalyst to help hold it to the soil, okay? So more of that natural holding capacity rather than hampering the biology that are not even on the surface of the soil, right? Surface applied UAN with a bacticide or a nitrogen inhibitor, virtually pointless because the soil's so warm on the top, there's not a lot of biology there anyway, okay? So save the money on a surface application. ATS carbon is the only thing that helps with those surface applications. It's the only stabilizer or enhancer that can be used on the surface. Trust me when I say that. These tests on soil are really going to help us prove what biology is actually where in the profile of soil. So you can see here, this was a customer of ours that we consult with that has 22-inch rows, so he replumbed a sprayer on 11-inch, actually 22-inch nozzle spacing, and then is out there applying that with this. So we've got probably, I don't know, a dozen growers that are doing this practically on thousands of acres and seeing very similar results. Here's our data. So here's our stream bar with cetane versus a 2x2x2 application, and we're at 258.2 and 258.2. I call that a God incidence, right? Not a coincidence. Some things are just, you take all this data point, you put it in, and you got the same thing. This is a practical application for the large grower. Agronomically speaking, not the best practice, but financially and practically, it has its play in agriculture. Also, we did do that top dress. I told you about top dress studies. That cetane works really well on that surface applied, especially because you're not incorporating that urea. So anyone top dressing urea in season, again, the biology on top of the soil, there's nothing there. It's been too hot. They're all down about an inch. So you need the water to move it down anyway, but you need something to create a catalyst to the soil in that process. Coating urea with cetane will help that. It's one of the most consistent products that I've tested. Okay, we're on the home stretch, I promise. I know I'm right between lunch here. Okay, they told me one, but I'm gonna get you here eating in no time, okay? All right, so these are real quick. Watch fors in 2023. Just some neat things that we feel like they're necessary to share. All right, no-till guys, sorry. Tillage studies, okay? This was a #1 thing that we see not only with row cleaners moving too much soil, but the planter following right behind the field cultivator. Nobody's ever quantified that yield data before. We can scout it, we can see it, we see less vigor, it's cold, it's wet, we brought all that up. So what Blake decided to do last year is like, hey, I want you to go work this block right away in the morning. I'm gonna follow right behind with the planter, and I'm gonna give it 24 hours plus. We actually waited a day until the next day afternoon, and they came back and planted. And this was one of those that I don't know, we get sneering. Well, very consistent data set, 1.4 bushel increase. A $0 decision, just simply waiting a day behind. So, if we have to push behind the field cultivator, we know that it might risk something, okay, we might give a little something up, but if we can wait, so far, year 1 data shows that we can wait. How about the ripper? Help can be hard to find in the fall, and sometimes we have to sacrifice that tillage pass. And it happens a lot where growers are, man, I gotta get that ripper right behind the combine. It's gotta follow the combine, it's gotta follow the combine. We have a lot of tillage up where I'm at. So this is what this study comes in. Well, we don't have that luxury on the research farm. We focus on the data, and we started to see like, man, you guys were wearing points out like crazy. I didn't do any tillage. We got some rain. Now my tillage is working really good. What if I had waited, right? For me, I was great because I didn't wear my equipment out as fast, but my waiting actually helped pick up a little bit of yield as well. We didn't sacrifice anything because we did a better job with that tillage pass. So just trying to put data to it. We're also doing something with summers this year. We have, I was trying to add it up last night, it's somewhere around 500, it's called 550 acres, a nice round number, of trials already set up with this Renegade. And this is their solution to the high-speed disc. This thing can change from 0 degree to 19-degree disc pitch, all from an iPad. So an iPad has Bluetooth to this thing, and you can control all of that on the fly. So the goal with them that we're going to be testing is writing a prescription by soil type so that this thing changes the pitch and depth based on the soil type as we go across the field. I think this can help me eliminate a lot of those ripper passes, okay? Because I'm incorporating some residue into the soil, I'm cutting it up, and I'm prepping that seed bed for next year where I don't have to come in with a field cultivator. I can let the snow melt and go right into it with a planter. So this is making a change in my mind. This was just one of the fields that we had done. This is again on-farm stuff, but we're taking a look at this, and we're also comparing this to a ripper. We're comparing it to some no-till and strip-till. So we have about 12 acres where we have those all laid into next show. 3-year project that we set up where we're going to keep those rotations in place. Pretty neat tool. Frost. This was something that I did years and years ago. Frost is an issue by me because we say what again? Plant earlier, plant earlier. Grandpa always said plant early, plant often. Okay, so you have to plant again. I like to say plant early, get profits, and yeah, you might be a risk. But we did see some frost, so we actually found a way to replicate frost. We took a 500,000 BTU torch right over top the row. The video actually deleted it by accident while I was waiting to come up here. No, I did delete it. 500,000 BTU torch right over top of the row at a slow speed. It ruptures the cell wall in the same manner that 27 degrees does. 27 degrees is what's called killing frost. So we laid those, you can see the strips, the carcass, the leftover of it. We just wanted to simply monitor what's the impact of frost at V2, what's the impact of frost at V4, and what if we ripped it out and came back and replanted? Because it's one of the most emotional decisions that we make in season. When we look at that crop and we go, oh, get the field cultivator out, okay? Because we're not going to spike in corn. If you spike in corn, that's a big no-no in my books, but rip it out, start over. Well, our data for 3 years showed that yes, we're going to see a reduction in yield. However, going back out and replanting after V4 was the no-no. This becomes the hard decision, right? Am I going to replant that or not? So a lot of decisions to be made, but what Blake added the twist to last year was, well, frost is something we can actually predict, right? I mean, we typically get frost warnings. Well, what if we go out with some potassium products foliar with the stream bar right over top of that row and set that plant up for success? What if we can help it build some stronger tissue? Can we help that plant recover from that frost after it happens? So that's where this study was. This is a new one, again, 1 year of data. And it's pretty interesting to see that, yep, we lost frost, or we lost yield, 11 bushels from the frost, but where we sprayed this product called uptake of potassium, there's no loss after that frost event happened. So kind of a neat one to look into. What can we do to help that plant prepare for the event to come? And then finally, sprayers. I think this is the low-hanging fruit in research from a practical standpoint. My college professor told us back in the early 2000s, he said, the sprayer cab will be the office for the farmer of the future. That means that we're going to be in the sprayer a lot during the growing season, right? Insecticides, fungicides, herbicides. So what can we do to enhance that sprayer pass? This is just one of many studies that we're starting. That we started last year, just simply looking at the nozzles. This came because I bought that 2101 Hagee, and I bought it from Sonny Beck, and he took all the nozzles off the darn thing, kept them, okay? And I thought I was gonna get them. And so now Blake and I have to go spend thousands of dollars on nozzles on this thing, and we joke about it today, but I did. I went and bought $1,000, and I thought, what 3 nozzles can I get by with? That was the farm ready, okay? Well, we can't get by with just 3 nozzles, but these were kind of the 3 most standard on the market used. Okay, our Liberty applications, we're using these for our list, and then those what we're going to use for our fungicide. We want to see, well, what if we just use the same one for our fungicide pass, and what was that difference be? So 1 year of data, here's how they work, right? We know on a flat fan, twin jet is pretty parallel. With this guy, I call that a dual attack. If you aim that 45 forward, with 45 pounds of pressure more, it actually opened the canopy up, and then that back nozzle was able to fill it in. Okay, so it kind of worked in dual in tandem with one another. On 15-inch nozzle spacings, the one over top the row, we actually aimed it back, so that we kind of layered it in on top, and the one between the row, we used to open it up. So there's strategies that we can do with our nozzles that help move yield potentially to another level. We did see, compared to no fungicide, that our best fungicide performance was with that nozzle on. No soybeans on top, okay? So looking at nozzles, not just looking at nozzles themselves, but also the spacing of them. If our sprayers are 20-inch nozzle spacing, but we're 30-inch rows, some of those nozzles are directly over, some are not. So what we did is we replumbed the sprayer to test those different spacings to look at what if we cap on a foliar nutrition feed, what if we cap the one right between the row so we're not wasting any product to put it on the soil and we just cover that plant. And then what if product works better on the soil, we cap the one right over top, like for instance, volunteer corn, we're spraying volunteer corn, or because we'll get better coverage at the same gallon per acre out of one nozzle versus two, or if I'm out there putting on Flex Star or Cobra, okay, if I have to make that rescue, reducing the amount that touches that plant. So we're looking at different nozzle spacings and how that might impact yield as well. Volunteer corn, we did this as a preliminary. I have an opportunity to meet with an autonomous sprayer company next week where the pitch is actually pretty cool. Like, they want us to plant volunteer corn. Okay, so we're gonna go out and randomly plant corn, and this see and spray technology is just going to be for that corn killer herbicide. Okay, think of our list, right? We're having some antagonic problems with mixing them in a tank together. We did the estimation on what we call a bad field. Okay, when you see volunteer corn out there and you go, oh, that's bad. We've actually counted, and it's only about 2% of the total plant matter out there. So it's a small fraction. Well, 2% of the plant matter that you only need to spray is about a 98% savings in the amount of chemistry needed to kill that. That can pay for the seed spray technology pretty darn quick if it's only putting on that on top of a volunteer corn. So this was a preliminary to see what does volunteer corn cost us. So at that 2% plant matter of volunteer corn, we lost 2.7 bushel a acre. That's how much those plants were taking away from the crop that we wanted to benefit. So some pretty cool things to come with that. This was supposed to be a video. I couldn't get the internet hooked up to my phone. Here's just a picture of it. Quick. This is called a green shield. A friend of ours had developed this. Logan works very close with him. He's an engineer by trade, and this was just simply to fold out when we're perimetering the field, to knock that outside nozzle down, to concentrate that chemistry, and not have that kind of wave effect in and out of our grass, okay, in and out of the CRP or in and out of the neighbor's field. Okay, it's not to prevent the wind, but it's actually the contact of that outside nozzle. So hit a button from the cab, it folds out, knocks it down perimeter of the field, hit a button, folds back in. Pretty cool system. These things are really starting to take off. It's called a green shield. Okay, so these things are called a green shield. If you want to talk to somebody who's really good with these things, Logan's here. Logan's been working with them from this research project, moving it into the sales side of it. So green shield, something else on the sprayer. Last sprayer study, defoliation. This actually came from this area. Anyone in the room defoliating soybeans before harvest? No? You know someone that's doing it? Yeah, it was somewhere in this area. A grower had contacted, just asked, you know, is there a yield gain or not? He's growing seed production beans. Seeing a really consistent moisture, but wanted to know, is there a yield impact at all? So we used defol, went out and sprayed, and you know, we actually did pick up some yield on it. It was kind of a surprise. You couldn't really see it, but just simply in creating a more consistent moisture, we think we had better harvestability, and that was where we got yield gain. So stay tuned for that one, more to come. Honorable mentions. I could stand up here for hours, guys. Okay? I really like doing this. I've got a lot of presentations out there. These are just some of the ones that I've done in the last couple of months, year. Carbon, not just the credit, really digging into the carbon of it. I'm not against the carbon credits, however, maybe I shouldn't say it, it's being recorded. However, there's just a lot of dollars being thrown at it right now that isn't going towards the research and development of the benefit to the farmer that's getting it, okay? So, carbon is something that can be beneficial in an agronomy program. I've done, like George said, 15 years now, 14 years of research on carbon products with CarbonWorks. There's some really good agronomic benefit to that. It starts with calling it soil. It's simple. Just give it the respect it needs. Don't call it dirt. Dirt's what Mama swept up on the floor behind us when we tromped into the kitchen, okay? And then biologicals versus biostimulants. If you have a bad experience with one biological product, don't kick them all to the curb. We already heard it this morning. There are dozens of different strains and benefits to different bacterial or biological products. So if you have one bad experience, it doesn't mean they're all bad, okay? So that presentation really digs into that. I end with this. I always end with some word, okay? I said it earlier, the most important book out of all the books we own is the Bible. This to me was a picture I took last year, and I thought, I'm just blessed. This is just a blessing. This was the first year we had all 230 acres set up with grass alleys and research blocks. And this to me is the hill, right? When I think of this Bible verse, you know, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. I get a lot of questions from local farmers, okay? Especially when we did that frost study. It was right across from the bowling alley. Every Thursday night, I get a text or a call saying, your corn's dying across the road, okay? Thanks, I know, it's part of the study, okay? So we are definitely under a microscope and given for doing our research, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really give glory where glory is due, and I think any one of you in this room could be doing this and should be doing this, and I think of the cup analogy is, when we learn something, it's filling our cup, okay? And if we don't pour that out, we don't make room for more. So if we have pouring out is the sharing. And right now, I love the sharing part, but I'm pouring out because it's making space for something new to learn. And then that something new mixes with what's left over from some of that stuff that I was just sharing. And that process is what really helps us all, really as farmers, grow together and really help each other and amplify each other through this process. There's going to be a lot of things happening against farmers. As the farm sizes get bigger, the number of us get smaller, that we're going to have to defend ourselves standing together to really make sure that the control of what we're doing is in our hands, okay? And not being told what we can and can't do. George allowed me the opportunity for 3 years to work with California growers. I got kicked out of the state because I didn't have a PCA license. I always say CPA license, that's my wife, okay? CCA license doesn't matter in California. You gotta have a PCA license. A PCA license is what you can only get by being certified through the state of California. And a farmer in California can't buy a gallon of UAN unless he has a written prescription from a PCA, and that written prescription is for the exact amount. So if you wanna go put 50 pounds of nitrogen on your corn, you have a PCA, write the recommendation, sign it, you take that, and how many acres you're gonna put on. And say you're gonna put on 100, so you're gonna put 50 gallons on 100, 5,000 gallons what you need, you go and say, I need 5,000 gallons, and that's all you can take to live with it. There's so many regulations happening out there. So I say this, there's many things we need to do to help amplify each other, and we all have those talents, individual talents, that we can work together and help, right? This right here, it's all for the good works. It's not for our glory, it's for the glory of God, and God tells us we should walk in those good works. Those are our talents. So with that, I'm looking forward to the Q&A session after lunch. Probably looking forward to lunch more in the Q&A session if I were you guys. No, I'm kidding. But thank you guys so much for the opportunity, and looking forward to what takes place next. So I think we should eat. I'm running behind. I see some stomachs growling.